Okay, so good morning again, and welcome everybody to the final day of the BGHRA's 10th anniversary conference, with the topic All Black Lives Matter, Black Germany and Beyond. This is panel 11, titled Transmigration and Transnationalism. My name is Adrienne Merritt. I'm an assistant professor in the Germanic and Slavic Languages and Literatures Department at University of Colorado Boulder. So I have the pleasure of moderating this panel this morning. And before I introduce our speakers, there's a couple of things that I'd like to say. One is I'd like to remind attendees to ask questions in the Q&A. You can find the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. Rather than asking questions in the chat, it keeps it a little bit more streamlined. And then it also keeps the chat free for conversation or comments or emoji reactions since we're on Zoom. Another point is that Imani from the Columbus Museum is unable to present today. And I will be doing a slightly different order. I will introduce people in order that they will present today. So the first speaker of this panel that I'd like to introduce is Ngozi Okwuosa, and she is an early childhood educator with 25 years of professional experience. She works with different kindergarten groups, including integrative groups. She is an author of German Nigerian origin and feels equally at home in both cultures. She enjoys spending her free time with friends or baking artfully designed cakes. Rapulu's Rainbow Stars is her first children's book. More are already in the process of production. She lives with their daughter, Leona, in the beautiful city of Frankfurt am Main in Germany. So let's welcome Ngozi.
Hello, everyone. Greetings from Frankfurt. Today, I want to talk about the magic of the African oil bean tree. And I'm going to talk about two trees. And I would also like to say why I made one of them part of my story, the storybook Rapulu's Rainbow Stars, and what that has to do with transculturalism. Yeah. A young friend of mine who has albinism, his name is Rapulu, he he wrote a post about how it was for him growing up with albinism in Nigeria and all that he faced, all the discrimination and the mocking and the name calling and all of that, and how that affected his the way he saw himself and his self-confidence, and what it took for him to overcome all of that to become a grown-up man that is self-confident. And reading that post made me to remember also my childhood in Nigeria, where I saw a lot of people with albinism, children with albinism in my school days that were mocked and treated badly or laughed at, not taken serious, not seen as fully human. And I wanted to help him in his mission because he has started going to schools and building a bridge between new students that go to schools to tell the teachers about, talk to the teachers about how to integrate these children that have albinism into a new class, you know, like what to do with the other students so that they can accept these children, and also what to do in the class, or how to place the child maybe by the seat so that they can see better, and all of that to make school fun and easy for such children so that they don't have to experience what he experienced growing up. I thought that was a very good mission. And I wanted to support him by just going to buy some nice picture books and sending it to him, because I believe in the powers of picture books and good stories. You see, I'm a kindergarten teacher, and we work a lot with stories and with picture books. And I believe that picture books have the power to change culture, to influence children to be better. So I just wanted to buy some, throw it at him, and I thought that would be so easy. Unfortunately, when I went into the bookshops to look for a book with maybe the main character being a child with albinism, an African child with albinism, I didn't find any. And I tried some of the popular online platforms, but I didn't get any either. So I was left with the idea to do it myself, write a book about a boy with albinism that lives in Nigeria, and publish it, bring it out there. So that's how I wrote Rapulu's Rainbow Stars, which is a story about a boy with albinism. And I wanted to show some pictures as well, some photos. Okay, just a minute. There we can see the cover of the book. Rapulu is being carried by his friends, and they are standing on the continent of Africa. Then here you can see also a map of Nigeria that is in the book, where Rapulu is introducing his friends. And his main statement in this book is always that he's a normal African boy. This is something that I realized when I interviewed a lot of people with albinism, is that they always said, I'm normal. I'm a normal African boy, and I'm an African man, very normal, and I'm Black. Even though I don't look Black, I am Black. So this is where my journey started, and I wrote this book. And maybe, as you may know, in many African countries, the condition of albinism is shrouded in superstitious beliefs. People with albinism face a lot of discrimination, exclusion, and even attacks. Yes, in many African countries, it is life-threatening to be a person with albinism. And this is what I wanted to change. I wanted to have contribute in inspiring a different culture, and to start with the children, because when children learn, they can still implement and change. They're still flexible to change culture, and maybe there will be a better future. Yeah, to help. So as to come back to the trees I promised to talk about, I grew up in Germany. I was born in Germany, and my family lived near an apple orchard. So there were lots of apple trees, and we played under the apple trees. We climbed on the apple trees, and it was a beautiful place to sing songs about apples, and to read stories or recite poems about apples. So this is where I was also in kindergarten. When I was 6 years old, my family moved to Nigeria. Here you can see my family. That's I'm the one there with the light blue jacket. You can see my mom, my dad, and my siblings. This was just shortly before we moved to Nigeria. So at this age, we moved to Nigeria, and I went to school in Nigeria. And during my school years, we also recited songs. We also sang songs and recited poems about apples and the apple tree. And we learned about apple pies. And we also learned that A is for apple. Yeah. So even though we had all the beautiful trees and beautiful lush trees and beautiful fruits, somehow we always had a lot of songs about things that had nothing to do with us or our environment. Often this created a value system or the ideology that things that surround us have nothing to do with academic, that to be highly academic, you have to put your mind on things that are abroad, that are somewhere else, like the apple that no one had ever eaten. Most of my children, my classmates in school never ate an apple during those years. Unlike now that apples are being imported into Nigeria, in those days, they were actually not in the market. So the children never ate or tasted an apple, or even they never saw one. But yet we had all those songs and rhymes and poems, and where we learned that A is for apple. Yeah. Now I would like to talk about the second tree. There you can see we were actually having an, I'm sorry, this picture is really old and bad, but I wanted to share this with you because this is the only picture I have of us going around the apple orchard on an Easter egg hunt. They actually hid some Easter eggs there and we were going around hunting for them. I'm the little girl standing on the left. Yes, now we can see the African oil bean tree. This is one that is not fully grown yet. It's still a small tree. They usually grow very tall and have this lush green foliage. And yeah, when I was a child in Nigeria, we spent a lot of time under these trees waiting for the magic of the oil bean tree. And I'm sure now you would like to know, what is the magic of the oil bean tree? Yes, when I wrote Rapulu's Rainbow Stars, I wanted my illustrator, Kevin Maturano, to have some pictures or a film or maybe some online written material about the magic of the oil bean tree. But I found none. I did not see any video on YouTube to show him. But I will tell you about the magic of the oil bean tree today. The oil bean tree produces long pods. Let's see, that's the seed. You can see long brown pods hanging from the tree. And when these pods dry up, they curl up and explode, releasing one tree. So these trees actually disperse the seed by explosion. When I was a child, we spent a lot of time under this tree waiting for the seeds to be expelled so that we can gather them. And the child with most of the seed that was quick enough to pick up a lot of seeds was a hero or a champion for a day. And I can tell you that I was a champion once in a while because I was so fast to pick up the seeds. You can see the seeds here. They're big brown seeds about the size of the palm of a child's hands. And they are used to prepare some food. But all through my childhood in Nigeria, we never sang a song or recited a poem or had a picture book with the magic of the oil bean tree. That's why I placed it in my book, Rapulu's Rainbow Stars. As you can see, the children are running for the seeds. This is an exciting activity that we had, but I could never understand why this was never in any book. Instead, we were singing songs about the apple tree. Yes. This oil bean tree, for me, in my feeling, stands for the unique experience we make as people who move between cultures. We often see things that other people do not see, and things that people take for granted, we recognize. Let me go back to the. Okay, here I am. So we are able to see things that people that are so used to seeing it, that it becomes so daily, that they ignore the magic of it, like the magic of the oil bean tree that I saw when I went to Nigeria as a child, and I said, wow, because the explosion is so loud, you can't ignore it. And the fun of waiting under the tree, the excitement of it, the thrill of it, and then a seed just falls in any direction that you don't know. And they're actually big and tangible. They're not just tiny seeds, they're actually big seeds. So that is something that stayed in my memory so much that I had to talk about it, and I had to write it. I had to put it in the book. And I hope my book inspires maybe future generations of Nigerian kids or African kids to write a song or come up with a poem, and to go away from saying A for apple, and finding things that are in the African environment to use in their academic books, and to give people the feeling that our environment in Africa or wherever we are is also very good and progressive and interesting to research on. So this is something that I think people with intercultural experience bring, and that is why our stories matter, and this is why our heritage and our perspective is so vital, and this is why our voices need to be heard. So that is what I want to say, and I have a video. You can watch that.
Yep, 1 second. I will bring this up. Okay.
At the very heart of Nigeria, near where the great river Benue and the river Niger joins together, lives a certain boy. Where is Rapulu?
My name is Rapulu. I am a normal African boy.
Rapulu has albinism.
I have a father and a mother.
This egg came out white. And this brown.
I have a normal home and I have friends.
We are all the same on the inside.
Wow! Pretty normal, don't you agree?
Okay.
Thank you very much, Ngozi. Bassirou, are you ready?
Hello, I'm ready, though I probably won't use the presentation.
Okay, I'll introduce you first. Okay, I just wanted to check. Okay, so Bassirou Camara is 22 years old, of Senegalese and German descent, and was born and raised in Berlin, Germany. He graduated from a French-German binational high school, and after graduation began studying economics at Humboldt University in Berlin, and currently studies Chinese studies and business administration at the Freie Universität Berlin. From 2018 to 2019, he spent a year abroad in Seoul, South Korea, as he worked for the German School Seoul International, which is a private international school accredited by the German government. Currently, he also volunteers for Africa Elects, which is an organization that focuses on poll aggregation and election analysis in Africa, and works for STEER, which is a student think tank that focuses on deepening the ties between Europe and Asia. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm very honored to speak here. When I first heard about this conference, All Black Lives Matter, Black Germany and Beyond, I thought about different topics about which I could talk about, especially because of my experience. And one that I thought was in some way personal, but also related to what I've seen in academics or how I live my daily life, is the idea of what is an ethnicity, what is a nationality. And I will come to that back later, to the more personal stuff. But first, to start, so the topic of my that I'm going to present you is called Ethnogenesis and Nationalism, and how that relates to Black Germans or Black people in general. And yeah, to explain the term ethnogenesis, might be a new word for most of you, though you can probably deduce what it means through its constituent words. Ethnos comes from Greek, and means a group of people or nation. You could translate it in German into Volk, which in English would be group of people belonging to a nation. And genesis comes also from Greek and means beginning or the coming into being or the creation of something. So the ethnogenesis is the creation of an ethnic group. And it might sound a little weird to us because nowadays we are used to think of ethnicities of something static, right? When you ask someone where they come from, what they are, they might respond they are Igbo, they are Hausa, they are French, Russian, or Chinese. And these things are not bound to change within a lifetime. And usually we don't expect them to say, my grandfather was French, my great-grandfather was French, and somewhere in their past life there was a change in that. But we're going to challenge this idea because obviously, as we know, ethnicities are a social construct and they are bound to change over time. As for me, as said earlier, I'm of German and Senegalese descent. To be more specific, my mom is half German, half Senegalese, and my father is half Senegalese, half Ghanaian. And I have this vivid memory of when I was 13 or 14. I used to play a video game online. I don't even remember what the context was or with whom I played it or what the game was, but I just remember I talked to another German person who was white, and we talked about cultural belonging, where you're from, what do you do? And as he came to know that I'm Black, he said, oh, so you aren't German. And I thought, how am I not German? And he said, yeah, you're not fully German. You're not completely white, so you can't be German. And then I asked him, what am I then? And then he said, yeah, whatever the other part is. And when I think about it, this made actually thinking about my heritage very complicated, because German can be an ethnicity, but Senegalese is not an ethnicity. So my mom is half German and half Serer. Serer is a minority ethnic group in Senegal who make around 14% of the population. And my father is half Toucouleur, who make around 10% of the population, and half Susu, which is a group in Guinea who make around, I don't know, I think 20% of the population. So no matter where that puts me, I would be a minority in each nation by nationality, but also by ethnicity. So I always thought if that logic was to be applied for each country, I wouldn't be Senegalese, nor Ghanaian, nor German. So what am I then? And that made me think a lot about these issues. And I remember when I was 9 years old, Obama was elected as American president, which I thought was very interesting because as he was half white, half Black, he made also his ancestry very well known. But I also thought it was always interesting how that was put into context, as he is mixed race, but mostly considered Black. Like, people would consider Obama to be Black or mixed race, but no one would say he's white. So that I thought was always an interesting discussion about where that puts people. And so when I was young, I was deeply interested in how do you define these groups? How do you how does an ethnicity come to be? If I'm mixed race, what ethnicity am I? Am I none of them? Am I all of them? Am I the one that I want to identify, or am I something else? And reading into the Wikipedia definition, I was very confused because it said an ethnicity is a social group identified by either religion, genetic background, language, or other identifiers. And that always confused me because it does seem very unsure. Is a German who is Muslim not German because he's not a Christian? Or how does that work? And as I got older and I read more into it, I realized that it is actually very blurry to make the line. I study Chinese studies, and I came to see into this group called the Hui Chinese. And the Hui Chinese are an interesting group of people because they're basically indistinguishable from the modern day, from the Han Chinese, which are the predominant group of people in China. But they are still distinguished as being a different group because they adhere to Islam, even though they speak the same language and they have the same culture. And or there's the Coloreds in South Africa, who are a group of a mixed race population who usually speak English or Afrikaans. They have a very diverse background, and what they share in common is being mixed race. So partly white and partly other African groups. And because of segregation and discrimination in South Africa, they were put into a separate category. There was white, black, and then also the coloreds, and they were also treated differently. And this experience made them think, or made everyone not really believe, but actually made them a different group of people. And one question that a friend of mine asked that I found very interesting and which challenged everything I thought about ethnic groups, and if you want to respond to this question, you can do it in the chat, is he asked me, if you think about nations, you always know sort of what ethnic groups live there. Germany, it's Germans. In France, it's French people. In Syria, it's usually Arabs. In China, it's usually the Chinese. And he asked me, what do you call the biggest ethnic group in India? What is their name? How do you call someone who's from Delhi who speaks Hindi? And if you can answer that question, yeah, that is actually intended because there's no answer. There actually isn't a word for these people. And the reason for that is that they never thought about themselves as a group of people that is separate because of their background. So if we speak about people in northern India, which are the majority of Indians, then there actually isn't a word to separate them from other people. You can separate them by language, but Indians usually don't do that. They just call themselves Indian, and that's it. And then there rises the question, how does that come to be? Why is it so different around the world, but somehow in Europe we have this very specific view of what an ethnicity is? And the reason for that is that ethnicity and nationality is a Western invention of the 19th century. That is nowadays a universal concept that is widely used in Africa and Asia and America and so on. As for myself, as I talked about in Senegal, we also separate people by ethnicities. And the reason why that wasn't a thing in the past is because in the past, countries were structured to serve a person, a king, an emperor, a shah, a duke. So there was no reason for the people who live there to associate themselves with a group who owns the country. It was only after Western liberalism came to be the idea of a group of people should own the land in which they live in, so sort of a social belonging. Also, the idea came to be that we need a way to separate between these people. And an interesting example I want to give in, which is very sad, is about the Rwandan genocide, for example. As in, to give some background, in 1994, the Rwandan genocide happened, in which estimates say 1 million of the Tutsis were killed. And if you look into where the difference is between a Hutu and Tutsi, the line is also very blurry. The most thought of theory is that when Belgium colonized Rwanda, social Darwinism was on the rise in Europe. The idea that people, because of their strength or other characteristics, are inherently inferior or superior than other people. And the Belgians thought the Tutsi are taller, they are more light-skinned, they have higher cheekbones, and they seem to be more rich and to be more light-skinned. Therefore, the Belgians said, okay, this is a separate group of people than the Hutus, and gave the Tutsi more administrative, more political power, which they used after decolonization, which led to conflict and civil war later. And if you look into the history, whether they are a separate group of people or not, there might be some genetic differences, but essentially they were never seen as a separate group, as the logic goes that Tutsi are so different from Hutu from their appearance because they were the social caste in Rwanda who were just richer than the other people, which wasn't random, which it's easy to explain as, if you have a group of people in a country like Rwanda who have more power, who become aristocrats, they tend to become taller than the other population because as they are richer, they also have more food, they tend to be healthier, and then their children are also going to be taller. And since they don't work 12 hours a day in a farm, they also tend to be more light-skinned since they're not as much exposed to the sun as farmers are. But culturally and linguistically, they are actually the same people. And to finish my presentation, I think this thinking about ethnicity and nationality as a very blurry thing, a very an obvious social construct is very important. I think especially to people like me, for example, who are mixed race, who have had difficulties to find their social belonging, their identity. Am I African? Am I German? Am I European? Am I Senegalese, etc.? To see that it is very complicated. And this also doesn't also go to mixed race people, but also I know some people who are just like full 100% Black who still have issues about nationality because you might have been raised in Germany, but you still cannot relate with the culture in the country of your parents. Or it doesn't even need to be associated with Black people. Turkish people, Arab people can have the same problems and social confusion. And I think we can fight this sort of social confusion by looking into the history of all of this and to see that there is no rule, there's no law. At the end, identity is what we make out of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I want to open up to questions. So this is just a reminder again that if you have any questions for either one of our speakers in this panel, please put them in the Q&A, and that button is at the bottom of the screen rather than putting it in the chat. Okay, I'm going to start off with the first question, which is for Ngozi. The question says, thank you for being the change you wanted to see. Can you talk some about the process of publishing? And do you have thoughts on the current landscape of Black authorship in Germany?
Oh, yeah. First of all, the process of writing a storybook, of course, it's very good if you are inspired and you know who you are writing for, and find out if what you want to write about is relevant. And then when you write, get some people to read it and give you feedback on what you've written. And that goes, I think, for all levels of books, from children to for adults. It's good to get some beta readers to read your book and tell you. In my case, I actually got in touch with a lot of people with albinism in different African countries and sent them the manuscript to hear if the story is relevant and if they can relate to what I wrote. So that's very important. It's also important to get some professional editors to look at your book and the manuscript and help you out. In some cases, it's good to get somebody who is sensitive to the topic, because it might be to avoid discrimination or language that could hurt in one way or the other. And then also it's then, of course, when your manuscript is done, you get yourself an artist or an illustrator if you can't illustrate yourself. If it's a picture book or a children's book or a chapter book for children, it's good to have a good artist that has a feel for what you're writing about. Look at their portfolios and find out if they can, communicate with them and find out if you're on the same page, if you can understand each other, if you can work together, because you're going to work together for a long time. It can go beyond 6 months, especially if it's a picture book like Rapulu's Rainbow Stars has about 24, 26 pages that are colored, that are pictures, that are painted. Yeah. Then, of course, you go into self-publishing. That's what I did. And I ended up going into a kind of a hybrid publish. That is, I produced the book myself, but I have a publisher that is doing the marketing and putting it out on platforms. So that's one of the ways. There are wonderful groups online to go to connect with people, ask questions, show some of the things you're doing and ask, what do you think about what I'm doing? Get feedback. It's very important. Yeah, now to getting Black children on books in Germany. I joined a group called Sebiko. We are a group of Black Germans. Our group is affiliated to ESD, and we are working on projects. Some of us are writing, some of us are illustrators. We want to bring out more books with Black German children, because many times when you do get books with Black children in Germany, they are translated. They are books written in America, and then they're translated into English. And of course they are good, but sometimes also you see things like a yellow school bus, or they're having pancakes for breakfast, which is more typical American. So we want to have children's book where the children are eating bratwurst and doing everything that German kids do. They go to German school and German kindergartens are portrayed and things like that. So we are working on that. Rapulu's Rainbow Stars was inspired and written for Africa mainly, but I see German families or Black German families
Ngozi, your screen froze. I don't know if you can hear me.
Christmas book coming out. So yeah, we want to drive it. We want to push it, and it's coming up. There are more Black authors writing books right now. Yes.
Thank you. Okay, we have another question for Ngozi. So is your book available in German and in English, or just in English?
Okay, Rapulu's Rainbow Stars is available only in English right now, but it has been translated into German, and I would love to publish it in German, but I have to take it one step at a time because I'm doing it all on my own. I hope some people would join me and make it happen, because I also would love to translate it into French and Swahili, because I would love to spread it more down to the grassroots of Africa. But I have books also coming up that will be only in German, because they are actually written for German children with bi-ethnic background, or a black dad, a mom, a white mom, or the other way around, and different grandparents that come from different nations and things like that. So they are coming out, and they are going to be in German only. Yes.
Great. Okay. So there's another question for you about Ngozi. So how do you find the artist, and how do you choose them? What kind of criteria do you use?
Okay. I think different authors have different ways of handling this. In my case, when I write a story, I have images in my head about how the feel of the atmosphere that the story has. And then I try to go through portfolios of artists I find online. I go on Instagram and I check and check and check, because I want to have the book have a certain feeling when you look at it. Like in the case of Rapulu's Rainbow Stars, I wanted it to be very realistic. I didn't want to have something looking like a comic, because the children with albinism are often criticized and mocked. And, I didn't want to have him looking funny. I wanted him to look cute and like a real African boy. I wanted to have all that atmosphere in it. So I do interview the illustrators and ask them to send in samples and compare. And then I also would like to see if we are flowing somehow together. I try to communicate with them to see if we're understanding, if the understanding is there, because that is going to be a working relationship for a very long time, and that has to work. Yes. I don't know if I answered the question very well, but yeah.
Yes, no, thank you. Thank you so much. The next question is for Bassirou. So is the work you presented part of a larger project that you are working on?
I would consider that project to be life. There's no, I don't do this for my university or anything at the moment, but as I study Chinese studies, and we learn also about ethnic groups in China, which is very interesting because as it is the largest country on earth, that they have a very diverse set of groups and languages and cultures, which does remind me sometimes too as how things are in Africa. And just thinking about what identity, what ethnicity, what all of that means is, I think, very interesting, especially coming from a household where many sides, many different groups are represented.
There's another question here for you. Well, this is from Emily. she's saying that she loves your work, and that she hopes that she can meet with you this summer when she's in Berlin. And so she's wondering if you could tell us what works you've engaged with that stick out to you and which have informed your thinking.
What works I read that informed my thinking. There is the Senegalese poet and former president and author Léopold Sédar Senghor, who wrote about La Négritude, which was an idea back in the day during decolonization about the acceptance of Blackness, the idea of African people being not only on par with Europeans, not even having to think about being on par. The idea that Blackness is also a beautiful thing, is a good thing, and that it is something to be proud of. But what stuck out to me was the opposition he got back in the day. There's also the French author Frantz Fanon, who had many objections to his idea, as he was saying, the way you use Blackness as an idea is the same as how Europeans think about ethnicity and how they brought it to Africa. And this conflict, I think, is something that I found very interesting, as it is a conflict that one can see and feel in their own life when they think about, do I have to even adhere to this concept that was invented back in the day for something that isn't that isn't up to date anymore? I mean, looking at the future as more and more people become mixed race or migrate to other countries, what does it even mean? I saw an article that was very interesting about the American census, that nowadays I think around 7% of Americans consider themselves to be ethnically American, which is a very new construction, because usually it was always Black Americans, it was African Americans, Hispanics, German Americans, Irish Americans, and now you have the ethnicity of American, who say that because of their separate culture and experiences in America, especially white Americans, that they don't see themselves as German, Irish, or French Americans, but as their own group. And at the end, that's also fair, because yeah, these groups are artificially created, if we want to say so.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's this question of, especially I myself am mixed race, you know, so and I also struggled with similar things growing up, of this kind of being forced to choose between one or the other. But how do you choose between one or the other when you're a single person, right? You're an individual that's influenced by a variety of things. So I don't know if both of you could talk just briefly about that experience of having, the German and African, from various parts of Africa, in some cases of feelings that you had, or negotiating how you felt about that and yourself and identity.
Yeah, I grew up in Germany till I was born in Germany, and I was in Germany till I was 6, and then I moved to Nigeria and went to school. And in Germany, I was the Black girl, and then when I went to Nigeria, I was the white girl. So I decided that I'm both, and I don't like saying that I'm mixed or I'm half. I prefer the term biracial or bi-ethnic, because I feel I have both of it. And I always tell people that I can't be half Nigerian because I don't have half a passport. I have a full passport. So I understand all of that, but I think that growing up in Nigeria gave me a kind of stability, identity stability, maybe that's what I would call it, compared to other people that have the same background, but they grew up in Germany. I feel this struggle more than I did when, coming from Nigeria, growing up in Nigeria and knowing my Nigerian side. So I think what helps is when you have two ethnic groups and you know both of them very well, it helps more than when you just know one side. So that's what I can say to this. I would encourage your parents to put children, to expose children to both cultures if they have two cultures from their heritage or background. It becomes complicated, of course, when there's more than two, which is the case in Bassirou's history. Then it's a bit more to learn. And at the end, we're all humans. And as often I noticed that my German mom was more African than my Nigerian dad. She had more of the stereotypes. She had more of those things that people would stereotypically say to be African than my Nigerian dad did. So growing up and watching that kind of makes it difficult to think in boxes. You kind of think out of the box, and you know, the person having the identity doesn't have so much problems with people outside. So I think when you learn that, you know, I am I, and everybody around can have their opinion and think what they like, but I define myself, and that's good, you know, then life gets easier. Yes. Okay.
As for me, I always thought myself like identity-wise, like from the racial background, always more as I always thought of mixed race, because I thought the idea was funny, because when you mix flour and chocolate, you can make a cake out of it, and it's still made of chocolate and flour, but it's also something new. So I always thought that was a great analogy to think about that. As for how I call myself, I think there's also an interesting shift that happened. I feel like when I was younger, when I was in school, it was harder for me to say I'm German. I felt like there was more opposition to it than now, even though that's not long ago. Nowadays, I think of myself as German, as European, but also as Senegalese and African. These identities not being in conflict, but also adding to each other. Yeah, I do think that identity is something very personal, and at the same time something that is also universal, as in these groups used to be created to see themselves as opposites or separate to other things, to other groups, but we can also use them to add to diversity, because yeah, I think it's just a great foundation for us humans to have, to be diverse, to be of different backgrounds, and to use that to make us, to elevate us in our stories.
And I think it's also, you know, we think about present day, we are pushing more to being able to figure things out for ourselves without other constraints coming in, of kind of pushing in different directions too, which I think is a good thing. It seems to be left in the past, right? Is a question for Ngozi. So have you been able to use your book in your own teaching setting?
I took my book to school, to the kindergarten, and I do have some Black children in my class, and they all went and looked at it, and they were, wow, this, they really love the children in the pictures. I've not read the whole story to them yet, but that I'm going to do that. Especially, I'm going to just take the German manuscript along and read it, because the English would be too much for children growing up in Germany. Most of them wouldn't understand it. So, but I do have a few children that understand English, and I would try that as well. Yeah, that's. I just would have to try that one day. I haven't done that yet, but they saw the book and they love the pictures, and they asked a lot of questions.
And as a kind of a follow-up question, could you spell the name of the group you're involved with, the one that's affiliated with the EFC?
Okay. Zekibu, that is SEKIBU. Schwarze Kinder. I'll have to check the just a minute. We used to call ourselves ESD Children's Book Project, and then we came up with a new name. And when I find it, when I get the full name, because there's a full name and there's abbreviation of it. We talked about this a lot.
I think Emily found it in the chat. It's Schwarzes Empowerment im Kinderbuch. Is that it?
Yeah, Yes, yes.
Okay, so if you're curious about that, anybody who's in attendance, it is in the chat, and also the group.
Okay.
Okay, I have a question for Bassirou. So have you been to India, and how was that for you? So have you been to India? And then a kind of follow-up question. So how was it for you when you were in China? Or even at home in your household with so many different people's, in terms of background?
So I haven't been to India yet. By the way, I saw your question in the chat earlier about how I use the word ethnicity in the Indian context as being simplistic. And that was actually also my point, that it doesn't work that way in other countries. And that's why it's such an interesting word that means different things in different places. When I was in China, that was very interesting. I used to, when I went to Asia, I used to go on YouTube and look for videos. How is it for a Black person to be in East Asia? I worked in South Korea, and to be honest, there it wasn't much something I needed to think about, though. When I went to China, I was in Shanghai. I was welcomed with lots of stares, and people would always look at me. And I remember when I was in the Bund, in the center district of Shanghai, with a larger group of people, it was a group project, and we were a large group from South Korea. And lots of the children also were mixed race or white, or from every corner of the earth. And the people, they took their cell phones and made videos and photos of every one of us. And when I went out with my colleagues, it happened from time to time that people would walk to us and say, "You're an actor, you're an actor." They would ask for photographs, which I thought was very funny, even though I think it could be very annoying to some people. And I was very anxious about going there. But when I was there, I actually didn't, I was less anxious then, because I knew that people acted like that, because for many of them, many of those people were Chinese tourists who come from smaller villages in Western China, who are tourists in Shanghai, and then for the first time see foreigners, for the first time see Black people. So it was mostly curiosity. I haven't been called names or anything. So I thought that was a very interesting and new experience. It felt like as if I was somehow famous. And and as to my family, it's very interesting, because the main language in Senegal is called Wolof, of the Wolof group, which are the biggest ethnicity in Senegal. And what currently is happening in Senegal is that we have this thing called Wolofization, which means that other ethnic groups adapt to this language and culture of the major group. And even though my father is half Susu, half Tukulur, he grew up only knowing as an African language as Wolof, the main language in the country, but not of his ethnic groups. And even though his dad was Ghanaian, he doesn't feel like he is Ghanaian. So there's even identity issues within the family. And as to my mother, even though she's also not Wolof, she also grew up with Wolof as her native language. So my parents actually both speak in a language they are not actually part of, which I thought was funny. And though with me, my parents both talk to me in German, but my mother also talks to me in French. And I was sent to French school in Berlin, which also led to some identity issues, because I grew up from 1st grade to 13th grade in Berlin in a French school. So I was in the French school system. I learned about French history, French geography. I went to France multiple times with my school, French embassy, French projects, French literature. And at some point I thought, I know so much about France. I know the anthem and everything. Am I culturally French? And I didn't know, and I didn't know who could answer. I am not a French citizen. I did live there, but only for a short amount of time, but also was very interesting to me as to how do you navigate this, because then I felt very connected to a culture I am at least officially not even part of. Yeah.
I think it's also interesting that people try to read ethnicity on people, if that makes any sense, because you know, which I wonder about that, because I've seen it shift. I've studied in various European countries, and sometimes it is, if I was in France, you know, was speaking French, it'd say, oh, you must be Brazilian. Or if I was in a different area, you know, speaking the language, it's like, oh, you might be from this area, or you might be from that area. And it's interesting how it shifts, if it's like, if they place you further away, or if they place you somewhere within the country, like Italy, sometimes it would be, oh, you must be from Malta or something, where they could make these connections. But I think, I don't know, I find it very fascinating of like reading people and placing people, but that I feel like is more in Europe, you find really strongly. Okay, so we have a question for Ngozi. So this is actually a question from Rosemary. Could you tell us about the characters on your cakes and how you connect with your customers? Also, do you have any pictures of these cakes?
Yeah, I have also interesting things to say about the cakes, because many times I have German Africans living here in Germany. They tell me, please, can you make a Barbie cake for my daughter, Barbie princess? And please, she should have blonde hair and look white. And I don't do that. I always try to encourage the parents to take a cake that will make their daughter feel beautiful, because the doll on the cake is looks like her, you know. So I make a lot of cakes for all kinds of events, and actually I started making for friends, and then it just went around and people started ordering from from a wider friendship circle or so. But due to Corona, everything went down a bit. Unfortunately, I don't have any pictures on this device, because this is I'm using my tablet, and it's quite new, so I don't really have the photos of the cakes there. They're actually on my phone more, and I can't switch right now. Yeah.
That's okay. We'll just be curious.
Okay.
Okay, so I think this is a question for both of you. The question says, I'm wondering if you consider yourself a part of or connected to a Black German community, and if you're involved in Black German activism.
Apart from the book group, I'm not in any other Black German group. I was in a Nigerian group, a Nigerian diaspora group here in Frankfurt for a while, but now I'm just in that book group, you know. Yes.
I do feel connected to, of course, I feel connected to the community. Since I went also, as I said earlier, to a French school, there were a high proportion of Black children and Black parents in that school. And I also always remember how when I was in elementary school, my parents brought me to school, how every time there was another Black parent, my parents and the other parents would like have a slight nod as to see, hey, we come from the same background. And in my school, we had also lots of African children. I think it's very hard with the Black community in Germany, since we all come from different places. For example, in France, you have lots of Senegalese, Guinean, Malian people. In the UK, lots of Ghanaian and Nigerians. While in Germany, from everywhere in Africa, Ethiopian, Somali, Nigeria, Cameroon, everywhere. So we do share similar experiences inside the country, but we do also have separate cultures. But I see recently, especially with Black Lives Matter in Germany, especially from the political side, there has been a lot of tendencies to see ourselves also as a group that wants to have certain, that wants to be represented in the Bundestag and politics and culture in movies and film. So, and yeah, and I think that's a great thing.
Yeah, and I think that it was Dr. Natasha Kelly yesterday that talked about thinking about more in terms of a diaspora, that there are groups where it's in the diaspora, you might connect to various groups, but also connect to cultures that are specific to maybe to your heritage or your family, that it's, so it's not an either or situation. You know, I think that there's maybe, if I'm understanding that correctly. Okay, so there's a question for Bassirou. So do you see yourself changing how you identify during your life based upon some of these things you've talked about today?
I think maybe if I would immigrate into another country, though that would just add something, but not like I will be Senegalese German forever. I thought maybe what could happen in the future is that there will be more people will more talk about instead of German, French, a European identity, as many Europeans speak multiple languages, that the differences also in culture and lifestyle between Europeans become so similar that at some point, especially with, for example, since I went to a French school and German, since everything was mixed, that at the end, we don't see a difference, that maybe in the future, European identity will be something that will hold more weight. But I would still consider myself European, whether that happens or not. And think no matter what happens, I'll stay Senegalese, German. And maybe if I go live somewhere else, I will consider myself also part of that culture. So it would just add on to it.
Here's a question for both of you. So how important do you feel languages have been in kind of your self-affirming identity or kind of culture journeys?
Oh, that's a difficult question. I started off speaking only German, and then we moved to Nigeria and had to learn English for school and Igbo for friendship, because English is the language of education in Nigeria. And I don't know. Then of course we also have the Pidgin English, which is also a language that we all love speaking a lot in Nigeria. I can't really say if that had an effect on my identity. I know that my German is not so good compared to Germans that went to school in Germany. So when I write letters or write anything in German, I always have to get the German to read again and tell me if I made some mistakes, because German language is kind of more difficult to write than English. And sometimes I feel that excludes me from things, like some promotions or some positions, or I'm careful to not put myself in a position where I have to do so much office work. So that can be hindering when you're not writing German like somebody who is born in Germany. But I can see that changing because we have more and more people from other European countries coming to Germany, and they also can't speak perfect German or write it. So that kind of encouraged me also not to exclude myself from from, and sometimes they come to me and ask me, how do you write that? Or how do you say that? And then I realize, okay, it's like my German is not that bad after all. But I can't really say because I just feel I spoke German at first. That's my first language, and that's the language of my mother. So I have a very great love for German language. And then the other languages came on top of it, and I love them also. And it's like there was always a time in my life where one of these languages was very relevant or more had more weight than the others. Like when I went to Nigeria, and then English and Igbo became more important. And then I came back to Germany, and sometimes I still have to find my English words because I am so much in the German environment. Yeah, that's how it goes. Somebody once asked me in which language I dream at night. And I realized that I actually have very abstract dreams. I don't tend to speak any of the languages when I'm dreaming. Yes.
As to dreaming, I just thought about this for the first time. And as I think about it, I actually don't know in which language I dream about. I didn't think of it as in language. As to the question, I think I talked a lot about the French thing in my family, but there's another layer to it, as in French is the language of education, the only official language of Senegal. All other languages are national languages, but French is not the most spoken language in Senegal. So I think around 60% of Senegal can speak Wolof, but only 24 or 25% of the country speaks or understands French. So that also put me in a difficult position, as when I went to Senegal with my family and people would talk to me, some of them couldn't speak French, so I couldn't even communicate with them. And with my parents, when they speak to each other, they speak in Wolof, they don't speak in French. They'll both know French. So I also felt always a bit excluded in Senegalese culture, as if a part of that experience is something that I'm lacking. Though I also had to think that there's also a lot of Senegalese people who speak a language that only 10% of the population speaks, and they can't communicate with anyone else, but for them, they still see themselves as fully Senegalese. There would be nothing else they could be associated with. So I think language is very important for identity, but it isn't everything. And as we see in many countries, I mean, in Switzerland, they speak 4 different languages. In Singapore, I think also some countries don't have an official language. I think America actually doesn't have an official language. And I hope I can still learn Wolof in the future. It is a difficult language, but I think with enough motivation and a good reasoning to learn something, one can always learn anything.
I would like to say one thing. I am very fluent in Igbo, and that's the language of my father. And that shocks Igbo people a lot, because they don't think I could speak Igbo. And then they ask me, how come you can speak Igbo? And we didn't know you were Igbo, because they don't, immediately see me as an Igbo. And I speak quite fluently, because when we moved to Nigeria, my father got a private teacher to teach us Igbo. So we were taught the real academic Igbo. And then of course we played with other kids in our environment, and we also got the dialects. And I'm also working on an Igbo learning program for Igbo children in diaspora that want to learn Igbo. I don't know when that will be ready, but it's a project that I really want to work on, because often it's said that Igbo is one of the languages that is threatened to go extinct. So I really feel passionate about making that happen. Yes.
There's actually there was a track, the rapper Megalo, right? He wrote Oyoyo, and he learned Igbo from his mother, some phrases, in order to incorporate it into the song. And I thought about that because he reflects upon the fact that he had always wanted to, but he didn't. You know, he grew up learning. He ended up, you know, learning German, and that's his main language. But I think that's sounds like such a beautiful and necessary thing of the program that you talked about. Okay, so we have, let's see here. There's a question for Bassirou. So here, thanks so much for your wonderful reflection. You said there was a shift between when you were younger and now in terms of lack of additional questions about your identity, to put it simply. To what extent would you say media, or perhaps social media, has played in that shift, or do you see other factors that have led to it? Do you perceive this shift as something that is noticeable in society as a whole, or more so or generally a younger generation shift?
I would split this question in two groups, as for how identity is perceived in Europe and as for the Black German experience, because I feel like social media was also important now, because like since I'm German Senegalese and there are not that many Senegalese people in Germany, there's a community, but it's not like you can just find Senegalese people like that, or there's no Senegalese district. But social media also played a role into finding people who had similar experiences as to my own. I mean, we are on Zoom right now, so I think that could count as exactly what I'm talking about. That now through social media, you can also see other people's experiences through YouTube, through TikTok and Instagram. You can connect with them, even though you've never met them or you want to meet them. And you can read about their experience and realize, hey, my experiences were very similar in that regard, different in another regard. And I do think that, especially in Germany, that there has been a shift in how to perceive identity, as in nowadays it does seem that people in Germany, or it could also be a Berlin thing since I live in Berlin, that people have become more lacking the word for that, but more German we would say vorsichtig. They wouldn't just assign someone else their identity. They would wait for, how do you see yourself? How do you identify yourself? The whole question about woher kommst du wirklich? Where do you really come from? Has, I think, had a long discussion now in Germany. As when I was younger, I would hear that all the time. Now people are like, when I talk to them and they want to know, they try to be, it's like they try to navigate traffic to ask something without offending anyone. And I think as a younger generation, I think the two biggest changes in this generation is, for one, social media, as in that changes everything of how we perceive each other and now that we can see how others perceive themselves. And the other thing I think that is changing a lot is how people use identity, as now it is also used, especially in Germany, as a way to ask for political power, for example, with Black Lives Matter, and noticeable in society. And the other thing is, since we live in a more globalized world, where nowadays when you go to school compared to, let's say, in the 1960s, you see more people who have different backgrounds, not only immigrants, but people who lived in other countries, who experience other countries, other cultures, speak multiple languages. I remember more than half of my class when I was in high school was had multiple backgrounds: Australian, German, French, American. And I think that experience also with people who aren't Black, also, since they know this experience in a different way, they can also sort of guess how other people feel who have a different experience, which is similar in some regard. So I do think that helps in people recognizing the history and experience of other people.
Yeah, I wonder also if it's partially in simply talking about it. You know, Ngozi, you talked about storytelling, right? And kind of integrating things of you know, not just the apple tree, for example, in your book, right? And people with albinism, but you know, also Bassirou, you talked about how, you know, the kind of talking about it, that becoming familiar with it, getting to know individuals. And so I'm wondering if either of you, Ngozi, you've already talked a little bit about this, but the importance of storytelling and media, in particular of personal, maybe personal stories, but not that people have to kind of pour their hearts out, but that we have platforms like this where people can actually talk about these things. So I don't know if either of you have any additional comments about that.
Yeah, what I would say is that when there's an African saying that if the antelope does not tell the story, then all we know is the story of the hunter, you know. So it's good for people of all backgrounds and cultures and ethnicities and experiences in life to tell their stories, because that's what life is. We have all this variety, we have all this diversity, and it should be represented in the materials we can buy when we go into a shop. We should be able to see stories from different people, and it shouldn't be one-sided, because then it gives a one-sided picture of life and of the reality, you know, and sometimes hides some very vital things that the world and humanity needs to know. And especially now that we are going into all kinds of, you know, developments are going so fast in the world that the knowledge and richness of different cultures and experiences need to be expressed. And it's good for people of color, especially people of German and African heritage, to join this and bring out their stories and their experiences, because they are unique. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. In one of my favorite movies, Club of the Dead Poets Society, John Williams says the line, "We don't read and write poetry because it's cute. We read and write poetry because we are members of the human race. And the human race is filled with passion. And medicine, law, business, engineering, these are noble pursuits and necessary to sustain life. But poetry, beauty, romance, love, these are what we stay alive for." And I think I really like this quote, because I think it puts art in the center, as in art, as in storytelling, whether it comes to music, to film, to books, to poetry. Because in the end, this is what we strive for, what we look for, what we like to see in life. And I also believe that storytelling also has a very interesting effect on people, as in, I can always think sometimes about opinions or ideas that I have, and I can retrace where I got that idea from a story, whether it's my parents who told me that story, whether it's a poem, a good movie I've seen, a song that I've heard. So I do think that storytelling is very, very important in all of this. And I also think that now in modern times, there's a lot, of course, to criticize with social media, but I think something very important that it created is that nowadays it's very easy for people to show their works, to make art, it's easier. If you have a camera, you can go on YouTube, you can make a video, you can make a film. While back in the days, to buy or rent a camera was so expensive that only a few could do it, or you needed, if you had a book, you had to run to a very special New York publishers to have a chance in making anything. And I do feel like nowadays it's easier for us as individuals to write our stories and to be heard of. Yeah.
Okay, we thank you both very much. We only have about 3 minutes left from this panel. I think maybe, so you might want to, other of you might want to check out the chat, just because there are some comments that weren't really questions, they're more comments that you might want to look at, this as a heads up. But I wanted to thank both of you so much for taking the time to talk with us today and answering questions and really sharing a wide variety of things that about yourselves, about what you're interested in and things that you're thinking about. And so if we could give kind of a virtual applause. And also buy Ngozi's book. There's links in the chat for this, for purchasing it, I believe, in the US and abroad. So I'm finish out now so that there's maybe a little bit of breathing room before the next panel, which will start at, or actually it's a keynote, my apologies, it starts at 10:45. So I hope to see you all there. Thank you again very much, both of you.